Hello, this is Tony Wrighton. Before the start of this podcast, people have been asking me for quite a long time about NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. If you're a regular listener to Zestology, you'll know that it's something that I regularly bang on about. Neuro-linguistic programming is a set of skills to help you manage your moods better, to communicate better with yourself and other people, and to do what works a little bit more often. And me and Dr. Stephen Simpson thought it'd be fun to set up an NLP program based on beating tech distraction. It's called Unplug. And if you want to go to iwanttounplug.com, you can take the course. It's because so many of the guests on Zestology, and I know this is the case for me as well, realise that tech distraction and screens take us away from the things we do best and the things we enjoy most as well. And I must admit, I am really excited about this course. Essentially what it is using the skills of NLP to hack your mind to focus better, think clearer, create extra time in your day, that's the biggie, and feel happier. So if you'd like to create a little bit of extra time in your day, you can go to iwanttounplug.com, use the code Zestology for 30% off. And nobody's saying that you have to give up tech. Nobody's saying that you have to put the screens down forever. We are just interested on this course in learning a bit about NLP and using smarter tech so it kind of starts to work for you rather than against you, rather than ruling you, if you see what I mean. So go to iwanttounplug.com, use the code Zestology. If you're someone who checks your email before breakfast or doesn't have enough time in your life, or sometimes feels overwhelmed by the amount of online admin that you have to negotiate, or if you love to feel calm and centered and focused, and if you just want to unplug a little bit, head to iwanttounplug.com, use the code Zestology, get 30% off, and it uses some very cool skills of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming as well. That's it. On with the podcast. This is Zestology, new rules for living with energy, vitality and motivation. I'm Tony Wrighton. Very excited today, like a kid in a candy store, because I've got a new microphone with me. As you know, I like to record these podcasts out and about. And one of the things that's been bugging me a little bit over the last few months is that when I walk around the park in London like I'm doing at the moment, the wind manages to catch the podcast recording quite strongly. And it just kind of annoys me. I want to get that sorted. So I've not only got a new microphone, I've got a massive, great big fluffy thing on top of the microphone as well. It looks completely ridiculous, but I'm hoping, even though it's slightly windy today, you're not going to be able to hear the wind. If that's happened, then I have done my job. On to today's podcast, and it is with the best named guest on Zestology in all the years that I've been doing it. It is Dr. Robert Puff, who is a world-acknowledged happiness expert. I spoke to him a while back on the best ways to make ourselves happy, and whether even it's important to be happy, whether we should strive for happiness or something else, like being in the moment or just connecting with all emotions. So Dr. Robert Puff, here he is on Zestology. Well, we are recording now. So, Dr. Puff, how are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Are you happy?
I am. And peaceful, I know a lot of people, I use the word happiness in my podcast, but probably at a deeper level, it's peaceful, because people think of happiness as, oh, I'm happy all the time, everything's great. But it's more of a sense of all is well. Things are just going well. And when things go off, I did a podcast yesterday where it will come out in a few weeks. I said, it isn't really what matters what happens to us. It's how we respond to what happens to us. Because, one person can, for example, go through a divorce and they can be devastated for the rest of their life. Someone else may go through a divorce and they'll be fine and they'll grow from it and they'll actually do really well in life. One person may lose a job. And again, they may be devastated. Another person may lose a job and see it as an opportunity for growth. So in life, it isn't about what happens to us. It's about how we interact with what happens to us.
Do you think it's about striving to be happy or about striving to be present?
I think the latter. I think what it is when we seek happiness, it's very elusive. We can't really find it because what I would argue, what I have found over the years of really trying to understand human behavior, at our core, we're born pretty happy. When we come out of that womb and we start exploring the world is a pretty cool place. But around two and a half, what happens? Two things happen. We have good things happen. We say, I want more of that. I want to hang on to the good stuff. And bad things happen. We say, I don't want that bad stuff. I'm going to push it away. So in the process of grabbing and pushing, we actually start creating our own suffering. So, and because those attachments, because obviously there's very little we can hang on to. Life is always changing. And fearing bad things happening can often lead us to those bad things happening. So what works better is what kind of energy am I going to give it? Because there's a lot happening right now. I can focus right now on talking to you. I could focus on, not that I would, but I could focus on my house payment. I could focus on, the weather. There's so many other things you can focus on. But if you really stay present in the present moment, what you'll find is in that presence, without your thoughts, without your constant egoic, I want this, I don't want that. I want this, I don't want that. Life becomes very peaceful, becomes very happy. So that's what I would argue.
Yeah. So it is all about presence and living in the moment, which are, they are buzzwords, but it's for a reason.
Right.
It? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of people struggle with that because, like you say, there are buzzwords, but I have found that life is very simple. It isn't that it's complicated, but we make it complicated. So it's like a simple example I like to give. Like, there are so many diets out there, like fancy ones, pill ones, tricky ones, but it really is going to boil down to two things if we're going to lose weight. We have to eat less and we have to exercise. And it's kind of like that with happiness. Is in life, if we want our life to go well, we're going to do our best to improve our life, to surround ourselves with beautiful people that we love, that are caring for us, but we don't always get that. So when we don't get that, and we've done our best to rectify that, and we still have these things going on that we wish weren't happening, then the next thing we can do is, if we want to be happy, is say, okay, if this is what's happening, and if I can't change it, how do I work towards accepting this? How do I work towards making this something I can live with? So again, let's say we're at a job right now, and it's not the best job. We wish we were doing something else. And right now, we can't get out of this job for a variety of reasons. So we say, okay, if this is what I'm going to come to every day, instead of being miserable, how do I say, I'm going to make this work better so that when I leave here at the end of the day, I'm not so exhausted. So a lot of life is about how do we engage with it? Because we do need to make changes, of course. I'm very big into that. But a lot of times we can't make changes. And so when we can't, then we have to work towards saying, okay, given that this is what I've been given, how do I make this work? And we can make anything work. Because there's a theory in science that says, if there's one person out of the 7 billion people on the planet that can be in a certain situation like you're in and be happy, then that's a possibility for any of us. So I can't think of any situation that a listener to your podcast right now could share with us that I could not find an example on the planet where someone was having that exact same experience and actually was doing well. So given that, what we need to work towards is, okay, how do I work towards doing well even with this stuff going on that I'm not happy about?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking about interviewing you today, actually, because I've had quite a long day. It's after 8 o'clock in the evening here in the UK. And I was at my TV job today, finished at 5, and then I had a kind of hour and a half drive in traffic on the way home. So it's all been a kind of a bit of a rush and quite busy. And I definitely think there's a temptation, especially when you work in an office job or a job where you're getting up and going to work and then coming home and maybe working for someone else. There's definitely a temptation to kind of count the hours, isn't there? Oh, only 2 more hours to go.
Right.
But it's so hard not to do that when you think in 2 hours' time I'll be outside in the fresh air and it might be a nice sunny day. And at the moment I'm just sat at work in front of a kind of dimly lit computer screen. That's quite hard. Right. It's just human nature to want to get outside and to want to finish and change your environment, isn't it?
It is, but again, if you can't, the question you ask yourself is, okay, if I'm in front of this computer screen and this is what I'm going to do, how do I make this work for me so it works okay? Again, it may not be the excitement and bliss and joy of being outside, but I share this story. There was a monk when Tibet got overtaken by China. some of the monks were put in solitary confinement. Well, one monk was put in solitary confinement for 12 years. And when he got out, he was able to, find his fellow monks. And he said, during that 12 years, I really grew a lot because I realized that even when I was in solitude by myself in a cell, I could look at the little light coming through the window and still see the sun. Even the bugs that were in my room, I began to appreciate them. So no matter what situation we're in, we can always find, I like this phrase that I say a lot, we can always find something beautiful to be with. So even at your work, having things that make it a little bit better, maybe it's photos of your family, photo of your friends. Maybe it's, stretching up and stretching a little bit when you're sitting there typing. It's just little things that we do that can make it a little bit better. And if the approach is, okay, this is what I have right now, and there's really nothing I can do about it. So how do I make this work? Instead of saying someday or some moment I'm going to be better, because what can happen with that is we spend our whole life waiting for that someday that never arrives. And because we can always push things off, because then we go on vacation, and as we get used to things, the temperature wasn't right, the hotel wasn't the best, the food wasn't that good. We can create stories about anything, and the reverse is true. We can be camping in the dirt and say, God, that was great. And we could stay at the Four Seasons or the Ritz-Carlton and complain about it. So it's all about what our minds do. And when we get that, we realize the suffering that we're experiencing isn't out there. The suffering we're experiencing is internal. And when we get that it's internal, the good news is that, okay, if it is my fault that I'm suffering right now, then it's also my ability is I can change that. No one else, I don't need anyone else's help to change that. I can actually change that myself. Because I can change that, that means no matter what the universe throws at me, I can actually have a pretty beautiful life.
That's funny when you talk about, making little things that would make your workplace better. I was thinking us British, we love a cup of tea. So, and it's even just the process of, do you want a brew? Oh, yeah, lovely. And then if you're not someone who makes a brew often, you get a reputation as someone who doesn't get the teas in, and that's not good. So there's a whole kind of rigmarole and ritual about making a cup of tea. And actually, we went to stay with this couple recently who lived in a very eco-friendly house. And they've basically got this kind of, I can't remember what the heater is, but it keeps hot water hot all the time. I don't know how it does it, but it does it in a very eco-friendly way. So rather than boil the kettle, you just press a button and the tea is made. But it was funny because it didn't seem like the whole enjoyable ritual of putting the tea on, getting the tea bag out, waiting 5 minutes. It didn't feel like you had enough of a lead-in time to make it part of the enjoyable ritual of having a cup of tea. Because it is a ritual and it does make us happy those little moments throughout the day. So I'm going to enjoy my next cup of tea quite a lot.
Yeah, and I think, Tony, you've nailed it really well, too, because what you're saying is, this is what works for me. This is what works for people in Britain. It's like, and you got to listen to your heart. You say, okay, there are things that I can do throughout the day, where even driving home in a long car ride, we can always make things better, and so given that, once we realize that we can make these better, then life goes well. When my kids were younger, the first time I took them on like a long airplane ride, it was like a 6-hour flight. And before having kids, I knew, I could read, I could watch a show, I could relax. When I had my little kids, it was like, I knew that ended. So I said, okay, I'm going to get on this plane and I'm not going to be, doing what I used to do. But it doesn't mean it has to be a bad flight. I will plan on just engaging with my kids. I had expectations of what it was going to be like. And it went exactly as I thought. I played with them. We walked up and down the aisles. We played games. We watched some of the shows that they wanted to watch. And it went well because my expectations were adjusted to what was happening. If I wanted to go on that flight and expected to sleep, read my book, and watch my show, that wouldn't have happened with little kids. So a lot of life is about our expectations. If we can adjust them and say, okay, I'm driving home right now. It's going to be an hour and a half. I can be grumbly all the way home and say, I got an hour and a half to listen to Tony's podcast. I'm going to start doing that.
You just made me very happy.
Oh, good.
And I mean, what about... obviously you've been very successful. I've been doing a little bit of digging, a little bit of research, and you've got an incredible profile. Weren't you the most Googled something for quite a long time? Sounded very impressive.
Clinical psychologist in the United States for about 2 years. Yeah.
Wow.
So.
What are you now? Like slipping down to number 2 in the list or something?
I don't even know.
But do you sometimes find that you kind of, even with all your work and research into not just happiness, I know you've written books on all kinds of things as well in terms of kind of relationships and healing and other topics as well. But do you ever find the ego taking over and you say, oh, there I am on the first page in Google yet again, and give yourself a little pat on the back and feel all proud? Does the ego ever take over, and do you have to remind yourself that that's not actually the stuff that makes you happy?
Well, it's twofold. One is it's never completely die, so it's always there. But I often talk about it. I had my grandmother when I was younger. We used to go to her house, and she has one of those clocks that would chime every 15 minutes. It was quite loud, and you'd always notice it. And my grandma would say, "I never noticed that because it's always there." It gets that way with time. What happens is when you work on this, your ego does get quieter. So even though it's there, you don't notice it as much. But the second thing is the thing you do is you realize that, okay, the ego is a path of suffering. If I buy into all this kind of stuff, I'm going to suffer. And I can actually share a really interesting story with you. My podcast has been ranked pretty well, around the world.
Yeah.
But on Thursday, I woke up in the morning, and one of the persons that helped me with my podcast said, your podcast is gone.
What?
I said, what? And the whole thing crashed. And, you could find it, but it's rare. Anyway, the whole thing crashed, and my site just got so overwhelmed it actually crashed. So I said, okay, I'm just going to rebuild it. It's going to take some time to redo that again. That's life. And I didn't create a story about it. I said, I just will adjust to that. And I think what happens is when you get that way, when things do change, you just say, well, that's what the universe is giving me today. I can make this work. Would I rather suffer and be upset, or would I rather say, this is what I have today, let's make that work? And what you begin to discover is when we hang on to things, and we anything with the ego, when we hang on to it, we're going to suffer. When we let it go, we're free. And I would way rather be free than to suffer. That's just my approach to life.
So we've got being present, and we've got letting go, and I think they are two massively important things. And we've got the little thing, and we've got making a cup of tea. So we've got three things on the list for happiness.
And listening to your show on the drive home.
Yeah, exactly. And listening to your show on the drive home as well. Now, I think, one of the things I've noticed with doing Zestology is the same similar themes come up again and again. I think it's the first time making a cup of tea has come up, but that's good. It's good to have new themes as well. What are the other, in your happiness podcasts, what are the other things that come up again and again? You think, it's just so many experts or so many people are telling me that this works for them that I'm thinking this has to be a good idea.
Yeah, one of them would be, I'm sure you've had this talked about. One of them is, call it mindfulness, call it meditation, whatever word you want to use.
Yeah.
I think we get so busy. And I've been meditating for about 30 years. I meditate an hour and a half every day, no matter what.
Hang on. So when do you do it?
I do it in the morning, and I usually do it when I go to bed. I can do an hour in the morning and half an hour at night. So, yeah.
So, I need a bit of meditation inspiration. What time do you wake up in the morning?
Early.
Early, yeah.
Quite early. So what happened was, I don't share this too often, but anyway, what happened was,
good. Excellent. Sounds good.
I've been meditating for a very long time, and I reached a point, I think it was about 10 years ago, where not only when I meditated could I get my mind pretty quiet, but I found was that when I wasn't meditating, my mind was able to stay kind of quiet throughout the day. I mean, like I said, remember my grandma's clock? It still would ring. I'd hear the stuff in the background, but I didn't engage with it as much. And given that, what happened was all of a sudden I went from needing 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. I need from 3 to 6 hours. So that was one of the changes that happened through meditating. Yeah, my sleep pattern completely changed. It'll require a lot less sleep. Yeah, I mean, it's been for 10 years now. Like today I woke up, I went to bed at 9, I woke up at 1. So I've been up since. So
wow. Yeah. Hang on. So, you went to bed at 9 and woke up at 1, and that was it?
That was it. Yep. So,
and you feel okay?
Yeah, I feel fine. I don't do coffee or anything.
What do you think that is? I mean, obviously, I think you are a clinical psychologist. I'd love to know the kind of the Boffin's explanation for it.
Yeah, what I would describe it as, our minds get exhausted during the day. It's kind of like a running machine, hard all day long. And it's that egoic, I don't know how much you've meditated, Tony, but I'm sure some of the listeners have. And often the first time you try it, you're amazed at how much thoughts are going on in your head. And they're going on all the time. You just don't really notice them. So when you get good at meditation, now, mind you, it takes a while to get to this point. When you get to the point where you're able to quiet your mind, not only when you're sitting, but when you're not sitting, I think what happens is you're just not exhausting yourself. So what I believe sleep is Sleep is needed to recuperate from throughout the day. But since my mind isn't as exhausted at the end of the day, because I don't have my mind going all day long, I can keep it pretty quiet and stay in the present. I'm just not as tired. I don't need near as much sleep. So that's what I think it is. So
that's cool. Yeah.
So again, that's a big one. Meditation is a big one. Just spend a little time, and it's a getting to know you. It's a lot about getting to know you. And we're so much, in our head all the time. Sometimes it's just good to sit. I mean, how would you and I get to know each other? We're asking questions to each other. How do we get to know ourselves? Is we listen. We try to listen. What's inside? What's going on inside of our heart and our mind all day long? And say, wow, I wasn't even aware that I spend so much energy about this. Maybe it's time to let this go. One of the things I like to teach is, if there isn't anything you can do about it right now, then let it go. Now, it'll come back again. I'll say, okay, but what about this thing, my medical scare I got? Okay, is there anything you can do about it right now? No, then get back to what you can do right now. It might be like drinking your cup of tea. It may be like listening to Tony's podcast. Whatever it may be, you're always coming back to the present moment. Unless you can actively do something. Most of the time, we're like just ruminating over and over again. Till at the end of the day, we are utterly exhausted. So.
Just interrupting this podcast for one moment to remind you that it is brought to you by my new NLP course, on't-nbsp.com. It's all about using the skills of NLP to beat tech distraction. And for years, people have been saying to me, and actually more recently when I talk about NLP on the podcast, they say, where can I go to learn about NLP? So me and Dr. Stephen Simpson, who is a regular guest on the show, we thought it'd be fun to put together an NLP course, not where you're talking about some of these NLP skills, which are very good but quite dry, not where you're just talking about them on their own, but where you can apply it to something. So we've applied it to beating tech distraction and unplugging and getting over overstimulation from tech distraction. So if you're someone who spends a little bit too long looking at pictures of your best friend's mum's sister's dog on Facebook, you might want to go to iwanttounplug.com, learn a bit about NLP, start to unplug, and I promise you, the best things in life do not involve screens. So iwanttounplug.com, use the code Zestology to get 30% off. And now back to the show. One of the things I think is quite interesting when you think about meditation, talk about meditation, is, I've probably bored my listeners to death about my trip to 40 Years of Zen, which was a meditation retreat outside Seattle. It's about a year ago. And it was basically a week of meditation with a few kind of strange techie things thrown in. And when I came back from 40 Years of Zen, I was finding regular meditation very easy. And kind of 10, 11, 12 months on, I'm not finding it easy. And the other day I tried to sit with myself and I was like, why am I finding even 15 minutes so hard? And I think it's partly excitement. I'm excited because I do it at the start of the day. I'm excited about getting on with the day. And what else is it? What else might it be, do you think? Have you got some answers?
Yeah, I think in our day and age, I was talking to someone about it the other day. We can do so much more nowadays, because of technology.
Yeah.
And that isn't necessarily an asset. We really can get a lot done. Usually people like, you, Tony, really care for people. That's why you do what you do. You're reaching out trying to help people, and it's exciting. But, in the equation, you matter too. So it's like saying, okay, what's good for me? There's so much research supporting meditation. There's just so much I could fill almost a building with it. There's constantly coming up with new research how good it is for us. So we say, okay, if this is really good for me, I'm going to really set aside time and do this. And I do think sometimes guided meditations can be helpful when we have a hard time sitting. But what helped me to really dive into it was along the way, someone said, one of the main things for meditation that it's beneficial for is growth. And I've always been growth minded. That's kind of what my thing in life has been, to grow. And once I heard that, I have been consistently meditating, really since that time on. So I think, having invested, maybe studying it. If you on my happiness podcast, if you go there, happinesspodcast.org, if you go there and click on it, if you go to that site, you'll get I have a newsletter that I give, but if you click on it, one of my better books is called Reflections on Meditation. If you click on that, my newsletter, you actually get I send you a free copy of my whole book for free. So if you just learn about meditation, learn about how good it is for us, because it really is changing. But you asked another thing, what else is good for us?
Yeah.
I think being in nature is really good for us. I remember when I was working on my doctorate, I worked at the VA hospital. And I used to, every lunch, I'd have my lunch sitting outside on the grass. Even when it was raining, I'd find a covered place, because I know it rains in England. And so, find a place where you're just outside and, we can be in nature, or even bring nature into your home, like get flowers, get plants, things that really bring you closer to nature. Try to watch those sunsets. Try to watch the sunrises. Try to look up at the stars at night. Try to just be still in nature. I think it's one of the most transformational things we can do. The other thing I talk a lot about is just kind of going on retreat. What I mean by that is just getting out somewhere. We have a day, a weekend, a week like you did, where you just got to be still and not be so active. I think they're super helpful for us. And I think, again, also learning as we learn about why it's important to slow down, why it's important to take care of ourselves, why it's important to develop skills of happiness and peace, then that's a learned skill. As we learn those skills, we'll begin to implement them in our lives. As I say, happiness doesn't happen by accident. There are very specific things we have to do to be happy, to be peaceful. So why not take some time and learn about them and then begin to implement them in our life? But the great thing about happiness, it isn't like with our physical abilities, our mental abilities. With happiness and peace, we can keep growing on that until the day we die. We can keep getting better at it. So we may be listening to this podcast right now, be 60, 70, 80. It doesn't matter. We can continue to grow and get better in regards to overall peace and happiness till the day we die, which is really cool.
So I've got kind of a really good actionable 5-point list to happiness. I might even call this podcast 5 Steps to Happiness, even though it sounds a bit like a very short Google article. What about you? What's your kind of current passion? Is it happiness? I know you've written all these books on different subjects and you've specialized in quite a few fields. You've got an incredible array of PhDs and masters and all sorts. What's your kind of current passion? What are you working on at the moment?
Just the happiness podcast. I just what happened was about a year ago, I said, you're correct. I just kind of dove in a lot of things, but I said, what do I really like more than anything else? I've been doing the happiness podcast for about 6 years. I said, I'm going to just focus all my energy onto that besides my work, which I have to do to support my family. But that's where my energy goes. And that's what I do. So it's like, I try to keep them short, like 10, 15 minutes long. I just try to keep them really tangible that you can immediately apply. And that's my passion, because I always think, if I was a kid, if I'd known this stuff when I was a kid, I would have suffered so much less.
Yeah.
And I really think people just don't realize that a lot of their suffering is very healable. I mean, I'm a clinical psychologist. I've been working with people and corporations for 30 years now. And the key of it is we can all truly have astonishing lives. It takes work. It takes effort.
I mean, you mentioned kids as well. It's just like, that is the key, isn't it? If you can bring up a child to be, have a generally sunny disposition, and I think, live in the moment and experience all emotions fully and not be too anxious, which is not the right way of expressing it, but you know what I mean? That is, that must be just the secret.
Yeah. And, again, we all can. So that's my passion, to give. If I can help 5 people around the planet get their lives to be better, that's worth it to me. So I just keep talking, keep doing this stuff. And I really hope that people will continue to find that the things that I've discovered and that work in my life could work in their lives too. Because I really believe the only thing keeping us from having a really high quality of a life is not our circumstances. It's us. And given that, that's kind of the tough news. But given that, the solution is also within us. If we make changes internally, our world will look very differently.
Dr. Puff, you have got the best name in all of doctorship all around the world. It's very easily rememberable, and it's just brilliant. It's really your trademark, isn't it? It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's easy to remember.
Do you ever, halfway through a meditation session, does your mind ever just think, I'm a bit bored here, I just need to go and do something else? Do you ever get that or not?
Not much. I mean, maybe 1 out of 50, I might say, I'm ready to go do something else. But 99% of the time, it's really pleasant for me. So, mind you, I have been doing it a very long time, but they're like exquisite. I mean, I try to, do it throughout the day, but a lot of times I'm done by the time the sun rises with my hour and a half, because I just enjoy it so much. I don't want to stop. So I just stay there and keep sitting. So no, but that takes time. It's kind of like with anything, if you're eating a really rich, deep fried diet and you go to like lettuce and tomatoes and, vegetables and fruit, at first it's going to be like, oh, but after time, you really get used to things. Our bodies acclimate. So we can acclimate to anything. And what I think you'll find is that with meditation, with being present, with really working towards being a happy life, it is a learned skill, but it's a learned skill that you've always had. You lost it with time. So just work towards getting it back. It's like riding a bike. You can get it back. It just takes a little time.
So what's one book that you'd recommend for people to live with more energy, vitality and motivation? And one tip of everything you've kind of looked at and talked about already, or maybe something that's not, one book that's had an impact on you and one tip.
Yeah, it's a little book, and he's a religious guy, but if you can get past that, it's a little book, and he just has deep wisdom in it. It's called The Way to Love by Anthony de Mello. He's Pat. That's Anthony de Mello, D-E, and then M-E-L-L-O. It's a very small book, very little, tiny. Yeah. Read it probably in an hour and a half. But but he just has deep wisdom in it that I've really liked. I've kind of read it. I can't tell you how many times I've read it. He kind of just gets it. And I'd recommend that one. Again, I know it has religious stuff in it, but just don't pay attention to it because he really barely touches that. He mostly talks about what works. So I think that's a good part. Yeah. And then again, if you're religious, it's great. But if you're not, then please don't circumvent that. And then again, the second thing I think is we can, if our life isn't going well right now, commit to making it better and just keep committing to making our lives better. If we commit to that, what's going to happen is it is going to get better. That's the whole goal world. I'm sure you know about that. You've done very well yourself, Tony. You know how goals work. You're in the sports world. People reach things by goals. But what if our goal was to be happier? If that was our focus, it's going to work. Those goal things work, but make it, instead of saying, I want to make a lot of money, I want to get fame, whatever, fill in the blank, I want to find my soulmate, make the goal to be happier. That is an astonishing goal. That's
and then the little things along the way that go towards it. And I think, one of the frustrations for me is the fact that if you get, I know you do some corporate training, and I occasionally make speeches to companies in London or wherever it might be. And, actually the things that work the best, it's kind of boring. It's like, meditate a little bit more and let go of stuff. But it's not that magic new pill that's just been invented. It really is just, being more present and a bit of mindfulness and meditating, in my experience. And it seems to me the themes that come up again and again, they're just not very sexy themes, I guess, are they?
No, and we like excitement. Probably the biggest thing, the last thing, I went at the gym this morning. I was thinking about this. I'm going to need to do a podcast on this one. But probably the last thing that keeps us from really hitting that kind of self-actualized enlightenment, whatever you want to call it, the last thing we have to let go of is boredom, because it can seem, happiness, peacefulness can seem boring. And because it's like, it's what I have found, again, I've explored the world. I've met the most advanced souls I can meet. And their lives are very routine. They meditate, they spend time in nature, they exercise, they do these things. Their lives are very routine. So I think, in our day and age, we really like to be entertained. But think about a heroin addict. None of us probably listen to this podcast think a heroin addict is a good way to live life. But heroin addicts do it because they love the thrill. I mean, they feel so amazing on the heroin. That's what they do. They'll sell their soul for that heroin. Now, we don't do that, but do we sell our soul in other ways, in subtler ways, like by being entertained by watching a mindless, show, by, maybe perhaps, drinking a little bit too much alcohol, by eating a little bit too much food, by having conversations that are maybe a little bit too negative. All those things may be entertaining, but in the long run, I think when we want to meet that exquisite level of happiness, that exquisite level of self-actualization, it may initially in the final hurrah will say, this seems boring, because now all of a sudden I wake up, it's the same. I'm happy. I'm not having these struggles. Like if a movie was just a person just being happy and peaceful, almost no one would go watch it. And it's almost like that with our own lives. We like the drama. We like the thrill. I can kind of share a story once. There was I worked with this woman once who was a speaker for domestic violent women that went to shelters. And she said, one thing really interesting happens at shelters, Dr. Puff. The women get there and they're so relieved. They came from these horrific places, and they're so relieved to be out of it. Finally, they're safe. No one can find them. They're very safe. But she said in like 2 days, they're very restless and they start hitting the bars again. They start they just can't handle the peace. And so, I mean, I know most listeners aren't going to be at that level, but it is something that you got to say, this may not be always exciting, but it's really beautiful. It's really, tranquil. It's just really awesome in the long run. It's just, you got to beat that sense of, I need to be entertained all the time. Life in itself is, when you can look at a sunset and just feel the beauty of that and say, that's entertaining. And you can see a bird and keep seeing a bird fly in front of you, and a hummingbird just sit at you, look right at you and say, that's entertaining. When you can be outdoors and even watch the wind blow through the trees and say, that's entertaining, then you know you've arrived.
Yeah, your friends will look at you a bit weirdly, but
probably will. Yeah, this isn't the path of popularity. I'll give you that one.
Dr. Puff, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. I feel a little bit more meditative just having discussed this stuff with you, and I'm also glad that I've realised the power of a cup of tea as well. Where can people find out more about you, all the important work you're doing, and of course your podcast?
The easiest way is just go to happinesspodcast.org. That's happinesspodcast.org. And if you can't remember that, as you said, my name's very easy to remember. Just Google Dr. Robert Puff or Dr. Puff, and I usually show up pretty fast. So
that is brilliant. Dr. Puff, you do indeed. Thank you so much for coming on Zestology. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Tony.
Thank you to Dr. Robert Puff, and thank you for listening. It's funny, I've been recording these podcasts out and about, the Zestology podcast, for the last few months, and it's been so cold, nobody's been outside, so I've just been getting on with it on my own. Now, well, the whole world's come out to play because it is a beautiful summer's day here in London, and everyone's looking at me and my new hairy mic a little bit weirdly. It's not that big, but it just does feel slightly strange. But you know what? It is quite windy now, so if you can't hear that wind, then the geeky part of me, the sound geek part of me, is deeply satisfied. Had loads of messages recently from people who've been listening to Zestology about having got some restore after listening to my podcast with Dr. Zach Bush. And also having read the Alzheimer's book, The End of Alzheimer's, with Dr. Dale Bredesen. So thank you. And do feel free to send me messages through the website, tonywrighton.com. And that is also the place to go if you'd like to get my 3 Zesty Things email every Monday morning. 3 zesty things that are just bringing a little bit of zestiness into my life. One of them is definitely this big furry mic. Thank you for listening. See you next time.